Hello students, today we are going to discuss Indian aspect of secularism. This unit would enable the students to understand the meaning of secularism, the nature of secularism in India, secularism and Indian constitution, and the problems of secularism in India. The English word secularism comes from the Latin word seculum, which means an age or the spirit of an age. It has the same meaning as the Greek word aeon, which is used in the New Testament for an age or era. The conflict between religious faith and human reason, which forms the part of the background of the emergence of the modern ideology of secularism, surfaced in the late Middle Ages. The term secularism was coined in 1851 in England, and secularization slowly became the part of the ideology of progress. Nowadays, the term secularization is generally employed to refer to the process by which sectors of society and culture are removed from the control of religious institutions and symbols, as religion is considered to be an open and budding threat to modern polity. Indian secularism has a peculiar quality. It is secular, and yet at the same time it is not. Being a multi-religious and multi-ethnic country, any strict application of the traditional Western concept of rigid separation of the religion and the political and a clear differentiation of their separate and autonomous sphere is far from appropriate. Secularism as an element of modernity required, therefore, a non-discriminatory rejection of all religion and all religiosity from public as distinct from private affirmations. However, Indian secularism does not focus only on church-state separation, but the idea of interreligious equality is crucial to the Indian conception. According to T. N. Madan, secularization ordinarily refers to the socio-cultural processes that enlarge the area of life, such as material, institutional, and intellectual, in which the role of the sacred is progressively limited. Secularity, then, is the resultant of this process, and secularism is the ideology that argues for the historical inevitably and progressive nature of secularization everywhere. Now we come to the meaning of secularism. All secular states have a few things in common. They are neither theocratic nor they do establish a state religion. However, in most commonly widespread conception, inspired mainly by the American model, separation of religion and state is understood as mutual exclusion. The state will not interfere in the affairs of the religion, and in the same manner, religion will not interfere in the affairs of the state. Each has a separate domain of its own, with independent jurisdiction. No policy of the state can have an exclusively religious justification. No religious classification can be the basis of any public policy. This has happened. There is illegitimate interference of religion in the state. Similarly, the state cannot aid any religious institutions. It cannot give financial support to educational institutions run by religious communities, nor can it hinder the activities of religious communities as long as they are within the broad limits set by the law of the land. This form of conventional secularism has no place for the idea of state-supported religious reform. This feature follows directly from the understanding that the separation of state from church religion entails a relationship of mutual exclusion. The Constitution of United States of America reveals some important principles that are included in the First Amendment to the Constitution. The first is non-interference, meaning that the state or the government shall not establish a church, and second is entitlement, meaning that the citizen has the right to follow a religion of his or her choice, or none at all. In the US, the Congress cannot make any law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, meaning that both religion and government can best work to achieve their aims if is left free of the other within the respective domain. Indian secularism is fundamentally different from Western notion of secularism. Secularism in India evolved in the context of British colonial policy. The British tried to stay neutral on the disputes over religion and were particularly careful not to be seen as promoting Christianity. After the assumption of power in India by the British Crown in 1858, a significant step was taken in introducing equality before the law by enacting uniform codes of civil and criminal law. The area left out was personal law, which continued to be governed by the respective religious laws as recognized and interpreted by the courts. The reason why personal law was not brought under the scope of the Uniform Civil Code was the unwillingness of the colonial state to intrude in matters close to the very heart of religious doctrine and practices in India. However, there were various kinds of governmental involvement in religious affairs that produced a somewhat mixed interpretation of this phase. During certain periods, grants of money were given by the British government for the support of Hindu temples and Muslim mosques. Christian missionaries were actively discouraged. Later, under other officials, missionary work was vigorously promoted. In general, the administration still remained fair, impartial and secular, and by the end of the 19th century, most educated Indians would have been willing to admit that. Generally, the aspect of the principle of religious neutrality was being faithfully observed. However, the nature of secularism that evolved was also influenced by the founding fathers of the Constitution. Gandhi actually rejected this idea of secularism, but interestingly and consistently advocated for a secular state completely detached from the religious concerns of the people. At the same time, he emphasized the inseparability of religion and politics and the superiority of the former over the later. He has written that those who say that religion has nothing to do with politics do not know what religion means. For Gandhi, religion was a source of absolute value and hence constitutive of social life, and that is why politics were the arena of public interest. The inseparability of religion and politics in India or the Indian context was, for Gandhi, a fundamentally distinct issue from the separation of state from that of the church in Christendom. When did he advocate that religion and state should be separate? He clarifies that this was to limit the role of the state to secular welfare and to allow it no access into the religious life of the people. Nehru, on the other hand, had a different version. He believed that India be a land of many faiths, equally honored and respected, but of one national outlook. Nehru was the main architect in the relation between state and religion in India, while Gandhi put his faith in the reformed, ethnically superior individuals in creating a better, if not the ideal society. Nehru considered the shaping of suitable institutions as the best means of achieving the same goal. Of all the modern institutions, it was the state which he believed would be the principal engine of social change. The ideal state, according to Nehru, was the first and foremost democratic, but also socialist because of its bad economic situation, and secularist because of the cultural and religious diversity in India. Nehru was convinced that religion is a hindrance to the change and progress which are inherent in human society. He was influenced by the experiences of European nations and Marxist thinking, and believed that industrialization and economic development would erode the influence of religion on society. Therefore, he did not worry too much about religion and its political implications, mainly communalism, because he avidly believed that these phenomena would vanish at the touch of modernity. Even though Indian society at large, constituted by a diversity of cultures, languages, religions, and customs, Nehru wanted it to become one nation truly. Thus, the secular state was a requirement in the period of nationhood, as it would guarantee the unity of India and further the identity of common Indianness. The founding fathers of India's constitution pursued a separation of two realms in the public. One was the political realm, wherein the interest of the national unity and the rationalities and imperatives of the state obliged political actors to speak and act in certain ways, while at the same time upholding the cultural diversity of India. The other was the cultural realm, wherein the community would celebrate itself and its own traditions and exclude others. This cultural diversity was the foundation of the larger nation. However, the political realm was not supposed to be contaminated by the unilateral celebration of one community or the open representation of particularistic interest of another community. Secularism in the Indian Constitution. In the preamble to the Constitution, India has been clearly referred to as a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic that secures for all its citizens social, economic, and political justice, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and the integrity of the nation. The problem, however, is that the term secular has not been explicitly defined in the Indian Constitution, where it is mentioned only twice, once in the preamble and in Article 25, Clause 2, which authorizes the state to frame laws regulating or restricting economic, financial, political, and other secular activity which may be associated with religious practices. Nonetheless, scholarly and judicial opinion are almost unanimous that the spirit of secularism is contained in the various provisions of the chapter on fundamental rights, which guarantees the minority groups that they and their interest could not be overridden in a majoritarian democracy. The various provisions of Article 14 to 17 and 25 to 30 reflects the spirit of secularism. For instance, Part 3 on fundamental rights and the right to equality, Article 15, prohibits the Indian state from discriminating any citizens on grounds of religion, caste, race, sex, or place of birth. Article 25 provides for freedom of conscience and free expression and profession, practice, and propagation of religious subjects to public order, morality, and health. It confers on the state the right to regulate or restrict any economic, financial, political, or other secular activity which may be associated with religious practices. Also, it stipulates that the state can make any law providing for social welfare and reform or throwing open of Hindu religious institutions of a public character to all classes or sections of Hindus. Here, Hindu includes people professing Sikhs, Jains, Buddhist religion. Article 28 states that no religious instruction shall be provided in any educational institution wholly maintained out of state funds. Article 28, Clause 3 says that no person attending an educational institution recognized by the state or receiving aid out of state fund shall be required to take part in any religious worship conducted in such institution except in the case of a minor with his or her guardian's consent. Therefore, it is apparent that Indian secularism, among other things, primarily means that the state cannot establish or practice any religion, use public revenues for promoting any religion, and that it should ensure equality before the law for all its citizens, irrespective of their caste, class, race, sex, religion, and so on. In the light of the spirit of these articles and the debate on the Constitutional Assembly, the Supreme Court of India has upheld the secular character of the Constitution in several cases. In the landmark Keshavananda Bharati versus the State of Kerala case, a full bench of 13 judges pronounced that secularism is an inalienable part of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution and that it is inviolable. A similar ruling was given in Indira Gandhi versus Raj Naran and more recently in Bommai versus Union of India case. Even though efforts have been made to uphold the principle of secularism, but the main problem lies with the fact that it is not defined precisely, which further leads to difficulties in ways of implementing it. Unfortunately, little consensus exists on these issues. Since secularism has not been specifically defined, it lends itself to varying interpretational problems. Now we come to the problem of secularism in India. The transferability of the idea of a nation state based on secularism into multi-religious societies like India is plagued with many difficulties. It needs to be realized that secularism should be compatible with faith and not just restricted to rationalism in a country like India. The state in independent India is officially secular as it does not recognize any particular state religion. Yet, in practice, the Indian state does not separate itself from religion, but it tries to give a picture of itself as a neutral country by publicly recognizing all religions and their social practices. Religious rituals, often with a preference for the Hindu, form a part of public functions held under the patronage of the state. In order to ensure the harmonious existence of various religious communities, the founding fathers recognized the importance of secularism. Secularism was seen as the only possible option that would be able to provide harmonious living together for the different tribes and peoples of India. Unfortunately, Indian understanding of secularism failed to provide a satisfactory relationship between state and religion. Partha Chatterjee claims that the application of the three constitutional characteristics of a secular state to the situation in India has led to major irregularities. These anomalies can be said to be the special features of Indian secularism. The first principle, that is, the right to freedom of religion, gives every citizen not only the equal right to freedom of conscience, but also the right freely to profess, practice, and propagate religion. However, the state has the right to regulate any economic, financial, political, and other secular activity which may be associated with religious practices, provide for social welfare, and reform of all sections. The second principle, equality, prohibits the state from discriminating against any citizen solely on basis of religion or caste, except when it makes special provisions for the advancement of socially and educationally backward classes or for scheduled tribes. Such special quotas in employment and education or reserved seat in representation or representative bodies have of course led much controversy in India in the last few decades. These quotas can be seen as positive discrimination in favor of certain caste. In order to qualify as a member of these castes, a person must profess either Hindu or Sikh religion. A public declaration of the adoption of any other religion would lead to disqualification from such reservations. The third principle, the separation of state and religion, declares that there shall be no official state religion, no religious instructions in state schools, and no taxes to support any particular religion. But the state has been entangled in the affairs of religions in numerous ways, and the degree and extent of predicament has increased since independence. The wall of separation can hardly be applied to the present Indian situation. This is precisely one of the reasons why Indian secularism is interpreted differently from Western secularism. The cultural and historical realities of the Indian situation call for a different relationship between state and civil society than what is regarded as normative in Western political thought or discourses, at least in matters of religion. In India, the state should favor all religion equally, which would be a required extension of the principle of equality. To conclude this topic, Indian secularism attempts to come to terms with multicultural India. It tries to unite the different ethnic groups, the religions of India by forming an identity of togetherness, Indianness. For the unity of the country, Indianness was supported by an Indian form of secularism. It aimed at guaranteeing the peaceful coexistence of different religious and ethnic communities. Indianness was imagined, but it was not accepted by other Indian nationals. This can be seen in the way the Indian state was alienating from the Indian society when it tried to unify different communities under the state. Indian secularism denied the role of religion in everyday life situations in a way that communities could not accept. An important aspect of Indian nationalism also presumes the promise for a modern India with economic growth and well-being for the citizens. The Indian nation-state failed to provide this, and the new India or new Indian nationalism started to emerge and demand the right to rule over their own communities on their own conditions. The traditional ethnic identities were stronger than the central government had assumed, and this quickly led to clashes and violence between different views on the idea on spirit of India. The violence was often conducted by political parties, which proved that it is nearly impossible to limit religion in the private life in India. With this, we come to the end of the discussion. Thank you.